Hello, and welcome to this edition of Secure Networks, the Endace Packet Forensic Files, with your host, Michael Morris. This week's guest is Al Edgar, former Information Security Manager for Health Alliance, and now Information Security Manager for Endace. Al, welcome to Endace. Welcome to our podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, hi, Michael. Thanks for having me on. Myself. So I've been in the IT industry for 20 years, 15 of it in dedicated information security roles. I've almost done the full gamut of IT. I've done the traditional help desk. I've done development. I've done first and second line desktop and server support. And then obviously over to information security, where I was started off in the operational side of things. So I was a firewall jockey. Moved to penetration testing. So I became a penetration tester for a bank where I helped build up and lead the internal pen testing capability. Then moved into more of a general security consultancy role, and then finally into management with my last role at Health Alliance, and currently here. So I got a whole wide range of skills, and pretty much almost seen everything there is to see in the information security industry.
And Al, that experience and background is exactly why I wanted to have you on our series, because we like talking to industry experts that have that experience, that can really share their insights for our listeners of how to better secure their networks. So kind of where I want to start with you is, having that very diverse background and been in a number of different organizations, what is your view on the current state of many organizations' cybersecurity posture?
And that's a good question, Michael. So what I feel is many organizations' cybersecurity posture at the moment, it's constantly evolving. It's probably one of the more dynamic aspects of any business. And I feel that with recent things that have happened, that any CISO worth their salt will probably be having the occasional sleepless night. And one of the reasons for that is that we've now got a increased cloud integrations. Obviously, a lot of organizations are going with a cloud first strategy. So increased cloud integrations and generally a more remote workforce means that the organizational boundary is now more distributed than ever. You don't have your two firewalls letting everything in and out, and that's it. You're all happy. And that makes it hard to secure, and it also makes it hard to track the flow of information.
No, that's a great point. The dynamic nature of things makes it nearly impossible. How do organizations ensure the confidentiality, the integrity, and really the availability of their sensitive data and systems, right, with that environment you just described?
Yeah, I feel it's a top-down approach in terms of people, process, and technology. So if you look at it from a people perspective, from the top, the board and the exec, they have to buy into any cyber program, anything that addresses the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As a proper security program generates organizational change, it's crucial that they support it. If they don't support it, it's hard to get that traction. However, on the other end of the spectrum, it's the end user, and they have arguably the most important part, because they need to ensure that they adhere to any security controls, but they also need to provide feedback as to aspects of it that aren't working. The last thing you want as a security practitioner, a CISO, is people bypassing your security controls and programs because it just doesn't work for them. And we know that, unfortunately, it's a sad fact of reality. It's important that any well-implemented security program, it needs to support the business to achieve its goals, not make the organization reassess them. Process, it's really important that you develop an information security management system or an ISMS, and that should be aligned to a known standard. So, for example, ISO 27001, right, or one of the NIST standards. And these ISMSs, they give you the guidance on the policy and standards that you need to implement. So again, the high level. And that is important because if you take it back to people, which I feel is one of the most important aspects of cyber, is people need to know what good looks like.
Right.
Yeah, and technology. So this now is, I guess, the rubber hitting the road, so to speak. So you need to make sure that you have the right technology to implement the technical controls that outlined in the ISMS that you're following. And I have to say, there is no, I've learned this, and I probably learned it the hard way. There is no wrong technical choice. If you can make it work for you, it's the right technology.
That's a great point. And often people get caught up of, am I making the right investment? Am I buying all the right tools? Do I have all the right components? But you've got to make it work for your environment. I think that's a tremendous point. And another thing I came back to your point was the early on, right? Especially in a large environment, it's hard to get everybody to comply with the plans and the policies you put in place, right? Because you don't want them working around and circumventing your procedures, because then it just puts a self hole in it, right?
Absolutely. And if you see that behavior, that's a really good indicator that you haven't got it right. Yes, sometimes you need to, you need to say no, we don't do that. But if they're doing it because it's actually impacting their business process, then you need to revisit it.
No, that's an excellent point. And I think a lot of CISOs forget to, take that feedback and adjust. So along those lines, from your perspective, what does a good incident response plan look like, and how is it tested and updated?
So a good IR plan, I feel, it has to be people focused and clear, especially in terms of objective and scope. When do we activate it? When do we not? And who is involved? That has to be really, really clear. And coming on from that is roles and responsibilities. So you can argue that this is actually the most important aspect, as any IR plan that isn't clear on who does what and why we're doing it is going to struggle to be effective in a real incident. It's important to note that in an incident, the normal chain of command and structure doesn't actually necessarily apply. So for example, the CISO may not make the calls in an incident. Communication. So I think, stakeholders need to be kept informed. And in an incident, there's quite a few stakeholders, whether that's the executive or the end user. What you say to the affected end user and what decisions do you want the executive to make, if any?
Okay.
Process. So people need to know, now that we have invoked the plan, what does that mean? What are the phases? What do we do in it? It's especially important for evidence collection, forensics, and documentation. And you have to, in a large scale incident, you have to get that absolutely right, that chain of command, if you are dealing with external entities, law enforcement, government, and such. Is our reporting of the incident and the timelines, the decisions made, and the actions taken, are they recorded appropriately? Because you need to learn, I'll say a little bit later, but you do need to learn from your incidents. And I think also very importantly, the writer of an IR plan needs to realize that it's actually a living document and it will be changed. German military strategist Helmut von Moltke said, "No battle plan survives contact with the enemy." And I think that's very, very true in an incident. So I think, regarding testing an IR plan, it's always good to have an IR plan, but you've got to test it. And so the first one is tabletop exercises. I personally, I'm not a fan of them. However, they are really good way of seeing if your IR plan is actually hitting the mark. If there's confusion or the attendees need to be led through it by the hand, then that's a litmus test that your plan isn't quite right and you need to train your staff more or simplify your plan. Very importantly, each incident is actually a test of the incident response plan. Ensure that there's a debrief of the team after the incident ends. Don't just pat yourself on the back for a job well done. I mean, that's great. It's awesome. You've restored services, you've done what you need to, but you need to loop back and talk about what went well and what didn't go so well. And in my opinion, the latter is far more important than the former, as you can feed that back into the plan. Again, it should be a living document. Training. Ensure that the staff participating in the incident have the skills to be able to be successful in it. Not everyone in the incident will be fixing the problem directly. Not everybody's gonna restore the services. Others have a very important role in it, ensuring that it's successful. Communications, stakeholder engagement, that sort of thing. Train everyone as to their responsibilities when the plan gets activated.
Wow, you had so many nuggets of information in there. That was incredibly good. I mean, there's takeaways for any CISO and SOC manager just in that one question alone there. So wow, you really knocked it out of it with those details. Thank you. When you take the next step, right? So what measures can you take to identify and mitigate potential threats and vulnerabilities? Kind of taking it down a level. How do you get into the measures?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good question. I feel that to be successful, first of all, you need to know what you're protecting in terms of both your IT and your information assets.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what you have, you're already on the back foot because you've got so many unknowns. You need to develop a comprehensive vulnerability scanning program of those assets.
Mm-hmm.
You need to run a risk assessment of the assets. You need to understand the lie of the land. You need to know what you've got to deal with. You need to upgrade your threat intel capability. Ensure that your red and blue teams are always watching the threat environment, and so they are ready to react if need be. What we've seen, in the last few years is vulnerabilities are being weaponized at a really, really quick rate. There's an easy 0-day exploit that can be easily weaponized and out and scanning within a day. We've seen it before.
Yeah, no, it's actually that you hit on the head. Kind of my next question where I was going is, with all the things most security teams, SOC analysts, CISOs need to do in terms of fortifying their infrastructures, how do they make time, or how do they take the cycles to really stay updated on the latest cybersecurity trends, threats, and regulations, recommendations? I mean, that's a lot of information in itself. So how do you even stay? How do you stay current?
Yeah, I mean, look, staying current, staying updated, it's actually really important in cybersecurity. I mean,
Right.
You will never be one step ahead, but you look to be only half a step behind.
Okay, good.
So what you do, first of all, subscribe to the various cyber blogs, vlogs, podcasts or publications. You're spoilt for choice. There are many really good ones out there. And similar to that is threat intelligence feeds. So they're generally more technical than the blogs, and they can contain indicators of compromise and other artifacts. There are free ones as well as commercial offerings that can actually collate against your brands and IP. And this is important. Subscribing is all well and good, but if you're actually not putting the time into looking at the feeds and correlating them back to what does that mean now from my assets that I know of and the lie of the land, then there's no value there, right? So I highly encourage that teams, they actually set out dedicated review time to actually review the latest threat intel. I mean, my morning routine that I follow is coffee, emails, intel. Coffee first. You always got to start your day with a coffee. But I must admit that I'm also like most of my cyber peers, in that I'm always idly checking my phone for some cyber post or feed outside of work hours as well. But definitely having time within your team's day to have somebody looking at the feeds and looking at it from a lens back into your organization, I think is key.
I think that's great insight, but I mean, I can just see how challenging it is, because it's really a mapping of the threat intel feeds and insights, right, is one aspect, but then you've got to constantly correlate it with your infrastructure, your business, your architecture. Do you have cloud? Do you have AWS? Do you have Azure? Do you have something else? Do you have so it really becomes a complex, sophisticated mapping, including what other tools and applications you have, right? So, and that kind of leads me to my next question, which is Can you give some suggestions or describe a best practice process for assessing and managing third-party vendor risk, right? Because that's another angle of, you've got all these third-party applications, you're looking at threat intel on everything, but now you got to know what you've got in-house.
Yeah, and look, I'll be honest, third-party vendor risk, it's very topical in cyber right now. I mean, you mentioned SolarWinds to most people, and they don't think, gee, they make awesome IT management software. They think of the breach. So, I think, a good process for dealing with third-party vendors and the risk management of them is, first of all, keep a centralized inventory of them. You can't have a risk mitigation strategy if you don't know what all your risks are.
Right.
Ensure that you know what they do, the services they provide, what information of yours they have access to, either storing for you or access to, and what access to your environment they have. And again, it's one of the themes that I come back to, which is visibility is key.
Yeah.
Once you have your inventory, try to categorize them by risk, not just cyber risk, but by other risk categories such as privacy or operational. So a good example is Amazon. If most or all of your resources are in AWS and that had an outage, what would that mean to your organization? Could it function? Could it not? Do a risk assessment that covers all of the risk types. And the best time to do that is when you're looking to onboard a third-party vendor. I feel they generally tend to be at their most cooperative then, when they're obviously looking for business, and they can and they're more willing to assist you in the assessment.
Yeah.
One thing that I've seen, which traditionally has been an area for improvement and is getting better, is in the contractual side of things.
Okay.
So where possible, ensure you have the right clauses in them. Good things you want to see are clauses around the right to conduct security assessments, mandatory breach notification, and clauses around data protection and confidentiality. Are they meeting a certain standard? Is there a clause to say you must have an ISMS that adheres to ISO 27001, for example?
Mm-hmm. No, those are some excellent points. I mean, you're building a blueprint for any security organization here with all these insights you're sharing. You mentioned people earlier, right? As a big leg of the stool that you were describing. So how do you approach employees, people, in terms of their cybersecurity awareness training and overall education, right? Because there's certain parts of the organization that's their day-to-day life, right? But there's large parts of many organizations that they don't even think about it, right? So how do you change that model? How do you really focus on the training?
So this question's one that's actually quite dear to my heart. I'm a firm believer that modern cybersecurity done right is one of the most people-focused aspects of IT. So with that in mind, you're, as a security practitioner, your customers, aka the end users, they need to feel that you're not there to beat them with sticks when they mess up,
right,
but that you're there to give them the tools to do the job safely and securely. And the training and awareness aspect, it actually needs to reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
So combining that with the continual messaging that, no, the cybersecurity team is not solely responsible for security in this organization. We all are.
Right.
So you need to develop a comms and training program that is engaging and not formulaic. It's really, really easy to you'll check all your emails, you'll check this header, you'll check this, you'll check that. And so that you lose your staff, your team. They just switch off. What you don't want is them, thinking that you're just lecturing them and stuff like that. So a good way to do that is you take a big cyber news item like breaches, and you do a comms piece to your staff. You break it down for them, what's happened, maybe a little bit of a technical write-up, but very importantly, you tie it back to what this means for the company and what it means for you personally.
Right.
And so that then ties in with the continual approach, which needs to be one of, you have your own personal responsibility for cyber. You are responsible for cyber just as much as your peer. And then finally, you verify that training through simulated cyber attacks like phishing campaigns.
Right. No, that's a great. I mean, you nailed it on the head. Everybody's got to feel ownership and buy-in that they're part of the cybersecurity defense system, right? So, I think you're spot on track there. One of the things big for me, I mean, you mentioned that's near and dear to your heart is metrics. How do you measure, or what are some key performance indicators an organization can implement or define to really track and evaluate the effectiveness of their cybersecurity program as a whole, right? Both the processes, the procedures, the tools. So I'll call it the program. What are some metrics that you suggest they start with at least?
Well, for me, I guess it's probably the least formal metric is how many times does this go off in the middle of the night, and now I've got to work, so AKA the number of cyber incidents and how quick are we to detect and respond. So I think that's a really good indicator. Another one is how easy and quick is it to remediate vulnerabilities, whether through monthly patching cycles or ad hoc. Overall vulnerability levels. You're always going to have vulnerabilities present in an organization, whether it's due to technical debt or whether it's due to other factors. But a steady decrease is a good indicator things are working. Conversely, the other way around. It may mean that there's something that you're missing in your program that you need to address. User clickiness. So how many users are falling for your phishing sims? If it's increasing, then you need to put more effort into your awareness and training program.
That's an easy metric. Yeah, I get that one.
Yeah, it's one of the fun parts of my job, sending those emails. And then finally, overall compliance of your ISMS to the standard that it's aligned to. Will we pass our next audit?
Right.
And I think that's a very important one. If aligning to ISMS standard is important for you as an organization.
Right. Those are some great points, and I think things people can take away to really focus on for tangible progress. So Al, one of the things I always like to ask our industry experts as they come onto our show is, what's one thing? I mean, there's a lot going on in cybersecurity. What's one thing you'd really recommend to our listeners and our viewers to really think about over the next 6 to 18 months in the ever-shifting battle for cybersecurity?
Oh, okay. I've got something that's very topical. You see blog posts about it all the time, and I'm going to jump on the bandwagon here. AI.
That's fine.
So, I personally think there's going to be a mass weaponization of this technology, and I think threat actors will find that it's even easier to deliver campaigns, exploits, post-exploit exfil. It's going to be far easier than ever before. And I definitely see there's going to be a lot of cybercrime kits that are going to be developed using AI. I also urge people to remember that anything that you send to AI to process, you have to assume is being stored somewhere. So whilst writing a prompt for ChatGPT, for example, write me a blog post for my Rotary Club, that may be relatively benign, but take one that is, take the supplied contract after this prompt and tell me if I'm missing any privacy clauses. That's not so. That's right. Your contract's gone. You have to assume that it's being stored somewhere. So that's kind of my take on it. Is one, a cautionary tale. Just AI is great, but just remember that any information you send to it, you lose control of. And the other one is that it's a tool for good, but as with anything, it can be turned around and be a tool to give professionals like myself, security professionals like myself, sleepless nights.
No, that's an excellent one. I actually read an article the other day about CISOs are starting to be worried about employees using any AI solution, doesn't have to be ChatGPT, with company, I'm going to say confidential information. It doesn't necessarily have to be secret sauce stuff, but just in the context of a very innocuous type of activity, can be sharing to get a response back information they didn't expect to be stored elsewhere. And you nailed it on the head. I think it's going to be a real problem in a number of avenues, both in what you described, more sophisticated attacks, but also, attacks based on people oversharing. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, AI is here to stay, but we just have to be smarter with how we use it from a cyber perspective.
No, excellent. Well, Al, thank you for taking some of your precious time out of your day to share insights on how to better secure networks. We'd ask our listeners to tune in next time for another edition of the Endace Packet Forensic Files. For more information about Endace's network packet capture platform and our integrations with our Fusion technology partners, please go to endace.com. Al, again, thanks for taking the time and sharing a tremendous amount of expertise with our listeners. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's been great to talk to you about this and share some of the things that I've seen in my years in the job.